Konnichiwa, minasan. Welcome back for another round of BattleTech Mech Warrior research. We are now laser focused on the first Secession War, the rest of the way. Sven playing channel, The Grind. The first Secession War, The Grind. Links down in the description below. Yep, that's where we're at now. We got past all of the bombastic, senseless genocides and slaughters of the people, the civilians, the nukes, Jinjiro Kurita. It's like all of that is done. Now everybody's just on status quo and on chill mode with the war. Basically we're going to see what the grind feels like, you know? We're going to see what this grind feels like at this point. The Boland Thumb now became the Boland Pinky, and the new Secession Lords are running amok. So, yeah, get your notes together. For my post-research thoughts, this is a call to action. Comment, like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification button. Buddy Christ. And let's begin the research. The Grind. Chapter X.
After a brief lull in the fighting, the First Succession War once again flared up in December of 2807,
Oh, it flared
when the
up.
Free Worlds League made their next step in their plan to rebuild the Boland Thumb. Descending on Marsal were the two lead units of the Boland Defenders, who made short work of the Lyran garrison, claiming the world as their own by February. Realizing that they could not ignore the threat still lurking within the Commonwealth, Lyran High Command redeployed to deal with the Boland remnants. In May, they countered with an assault on Radostov, liberating the planet once again after a 2-month campaign. 2808 is the point that some historians cite as the year when the First Succession War entered its second phase.
Oh.
By this stage, every successor state had exhausted their strategic reserves. Most of the shipyards and many of the battle mech factories lay in ruins. Warships and jump ships were extremely scarce. Even ammunition was becoming hard to come by.
Well, that's what would happen when you drop nothing but
Was in
nukes
widespread
as your
use
first strikes.
in every realm to try and maintain operational numbers. Wave after wave of new recruits were
That's actually
rushed
good
through
art.
training, and the cadets being put onto the front lines were younger and younger.
Kids.
One realm that was feeling the hurt from three sides was the Capellan Confederation. The Federated Suns were riding the wave of momentum that swept a path forward, but also threatened to break and turn towards the Confederation. Since the disaster at Orient, the Free Worlds League had reclaimed all of the worlds the CCAF had only just liberated, and then dispatched their Merrick militia alongside Smithson's Chinese bandits to grab Mozero. The best they could muster in retaliation was a raid on Nova Roma by the Chevaux Leger, and the two would battle on and off over the next 5 years for control of the planet Ibstock.
Yeah, the Feds
The
have a rough
only
time.
saving grace was that Thaddeus Merrick remained much more interested in the Lyran Commonwealth than following through on his father's desire to crush House Liao. For the Chancellor, the most pressing concern was the sharp increase in action towards Terra. Their last attempt to retake Ronal in 2805 had failed. Since then, the Draconis Combine had been conducting a side campaign within the former hegemony. In time, they would take another 6 worlds from the Tikhonov commonality. It was with this threat looming that Chancellor Ilsa Liao made one of the most shocking decisions of the Succession Wars. In April 2808, Ilsa Liao renounced her claim to the First Lordship.
What?
Furthermore, she sent a messenger to First Prince Paul Davian and offered to back his candidacy. The condition for her support was simple: recognize Confederation ownership of the Chesterton worlds. To the ruling class of the Federated Suns, this incredible offer seemed almost too good to be true. First of all, a cessation of hostilities on the Capellan front would allow them to focus all their energies against the Draconis Combine in the upcoming second offensive.
Yeah, they're
Paul
getting
was planning.
pummeled everywhere.
It came at the cost of Chesterton and its subsidiaries, but the truth of the matter was that they were almost all in Confederation hands already, and would take considerable effort to win back. But perhaps even more significant, with Davian and Liao aligned behind the First Prince, all it would take is to win the support of a party neutral to both of them, i.e. the Lyran Commonwealth, to have a voting majority among the former members of the Star League High Council. In June, the Chancellor received Paul's response. The first prince dispatched the Crucis Lancers to take Ulaanbaatar and then Farwell 2 months later. His rejection shocked the nobility of both realms and threatened to undermine his newfound popularity at home. Pundits at the time lambasted his arrogance, but the Davian lord might have realized something that his contemporaries did not, save perhaps Ilsa Liao herself. The succession wars were and are a farce. The Star League, if it even still existed at the commencement of the hostilities, had long since faded into memory.
Right.
The Terran hegemony was gone too. There were only the successor states left, and there was no higher authority that any of the House Lords would recognize anymore. Ilsa's offer to name him First Lord was hollow, an appeal only to vanity, and the price was to sacrifice systems that had belonged to the Federated Suns for over 400 years. As 2808 drew to a close, the AFFS was getting ready to launch their second counteroffensive. The goal was twofold. The primary objective was to drive the DCMS out of the Crucis March altogether, while secondary assaults took aim at the extreme flanks of the Draconis March. Troops were assembled on Castleton and Roe, launching their attack in the first 3 months of 2809. Nearby, the Crucis Lancers succeeded in capturing Farwell and Ulaanbaatar that March. The Castleton Task Force showed early success, taking the planets Johnsondale and Olancha by mid-year. Included on the list of targets for Davian's campaign were the worlds of Cassius and Udibi, 2 systems that lay within the pre-war borders of the Draconis Combine. It was the first time a concentrated effort had been made to seize Kiritan territory since the war began.
Wow.
Understandably, this side of the front saw much fiercer resistance compared to the liberation campaigns of the past decade, where the locals were only too happy to assist the arriving AFFS. Nevertheless, the planets were secure by year's end. Between October and December, both flanking groups were moving on to secondary targets, while a third task force advanced up the center, hoping to retake the capital of the Kestrel combat region. In an effort to finally push the Free World's military out of the Alarian province, an assault was made on the fortified stronghold of Crux in November. Going in at a numbers disadvantage was always going to be a risky gamble, and the Lyrans ultimately had to concede defeat in January. They had more success closer to the border, when they took back Alula Borealis in May 2810.
Wow. The whole thing with Davian and Ilsa, that was actually a shocking reality, because I understood the Capellans just did not have really enough strength to be able to deal with the hits that they were getting from both Lyran and Kurita, and going to Davian was a move, and I could see where Davian took the hit from in terms of his reputation, the optics, because that meant bringing Ilsa into the fold meant that they would get the Capellans off the battle board. You know what I'm saying? Like the remove the chess piece. So I can understand why they would be upset with him, but he kind of saw a reality that nobody else was noticing, and not even Ilsa herself, and that is the fact that the Terran hegemony, as it was in the past, is now in the ether. It's now just a historical bookmark. It's just a historical chapter at this point. They can't turn back the clock, basically. And it was that's a very sad thing to hear, when that the Free Worlds League and the Terran hegemony was what kept the galaxy, together, and you wanted to get that back so that way all the madness would stop. But then you kind of come to the reality that Kerensky's gone, they're all gone, they're out in the periphery, whoever survived, and anybody who stayed behind are long dead, are either long dead or too old, too old to be able to act upon. Everything changed. The majority of the successor lords, basically all but one successor lord, is dead. Well, now they're all dead. Actually, they're all dead. All of the successor lords that started the dang war are gone. They either were assassinated, killed in combat, or died of diseases, or assassinated. They're all dead. And those were the remnants of the Star League, and Comstar already had already successfully made their move and was able to reinsert themselves in the center with Terra on Terra. So it's like, okay, well, we can't make this alliance because it's hollow, it rings hollow. It's a vanity. It's all vanity. Like, Ilsa wasn't trying to, worm her way in or take over the Confederated Sons or any of that. She just wanted to save Capellan from being in the hands of Kurita. But even though, but it came with it. On the pretense that they could be able to turn back the clock and get Star League back in place, get the Terran hegemony back in place, and the truth is, there is no more Terran hegemony. Terra, people are fighting over Terra at this point. Comstar is in a whole world of its own, and cannot bind everybody together. They're on their own. Everybody's basically on their own, and that's it's tragic, It's very tragic. And meanwhile, Davian was able to make some headways, infiltrating Kuritan airspace and getting some land back and everything. Well, some galaxies back, if you will, getting back some solar systems along the way. While the Boland Pinky is still being fought over and over and over. It's a back and forth affair. It's pretty crazy. Seeing that, like, just give up the dang Pinky. No, seriously. When you look at the map, there's only 2 systems left in that Pinky. Just let it go. Let it go. Turn it into the Boland Nub, the Boland Knuckle at this point, because that's all you're gonna have left is this knuckle. Very stubborn group. Very stubborn group.
The previous December, the Federated Sons had moved to reclaim Demeter from the Chesterton Commonalty, completing the liberation a few months later. The retreating Zurich Lancers were pursued across Algot, Halloran and Uaragon in the early part of 2810, before the AFFS focused instead on Teribert. Their effort to take the planet turned especially nasty when both sides deployed nuclear weapons. The major settlements on the world were caught in the blast, after which the viability of the planet collapsed. Fighting ended in June when both the Capellans and Davian Liberators abandoned the system.
Damn.
The Liao Lancers had their chance at payback later that year with a raid of their own against Jaipur. The Davian counteroffensive maintained its momentum into 2810, the 3 task groups landing on 9 different worlds altogether between February
Wow, that's a lot of land.
Word of the pincer attack the Fed Sons were attempting had made it to those infantry regiments guarding the center of the line. Fear of an impending encirclement and potentially harsh retributions for their actions earlier in the war caused many to desert their posts. This left the battle mech units unsupported and exposed. McKinnon's raiders undertook deep raids against the Combine throughout the year to keep them off balance. A lack of available transports further hampered Kurita's efforts to blunt the Davian advance. The second, much shorter counteroffensive concluded in December. Paul Davian had planned to take a pause here to regroup, but reports from the front suggested that the Draconis Combine mustered soldiery were finally forming a defensive line ahead. The longer he waited, the better prepared Kurita would be once the fighting resumed.
Makes sense.
He therefore hurried to move up reinforcements and supplies to begin the third counteroffensive ahead of schedule, early in the new year. Archon Richard Steiner had run out of patience with his ineffectual military leadership. One of the few units to achieve success for the Commonwealth had been the Stealth's Mercenary Regiment. In recent years, they had helped make possible, either through direct assault or supporting raids, the capture of 2 planets within the Dieron military district. For that reason, the Archon made the decision to nationalize the unit in 2810. At great cost, he bought out the entire regiment. Colonel Hempstead was paid a handsome fee to sign on with the LCAF, and given greater authority to command operations on the ground. As part of the deal, the stealths were granted a period of rest and recreation, far away from the Curitan front. In December, the Lyran Commonwealth made another attempt to retake Marsal. Despite a relative parity in the numbers, the Boland defenders were able to hold their ground and force the LCAF to withdraw in the new year, handing the Archon his second defeat in successive years.
Damn.
In an effort to relieve the pressure on those stranded units, the Captain General decided to launch a diversionary campaign on the extreme end of the border at Poulsbo. If the attack here proved successful, Thaddeus Matic hoped to link up with the Crux from both sides, cutting off a large chunk of the Eladium province. They made landfall in early 2811, expecting minimal resistance, but they found the fully recuperated stealths and a strong aerospace presence. A detachment of fighters swept in on the recharging jump ships and destroyed them in seconds, stranding the Atrian Dragoons on world. The Lyrans now used their complete air superiority to hunt down and wipe out the entire regiment. With his campaign on Poulsbo brought to a sudden and ignominious end in March, the Captain General reluctantly accepted the fact that the Boland Thumb was lost. He dispatched messages to the last of the defenders, informing them of his decision. The subtext of his missive was clear. He expected them to fight to the last. While the decision to move the stealths over to Poulsbo proved extremely fortuitous, some even speculate the LIC was aware of Thaddeus's plans and the Archon's offer of R&R was a ruse, it unfortunately came at the cost of further losses on the Curitan front.
Damn.
In the past few years, the Draconis Combine had taken 4 systems from the Tamar Pact, getting dangerously close to their capital.
Oh.
If the Federated Suns had learned anything from their near destruction, it was that the division of their perimeter marches into combat regions had contributed significantly to the way in which the DCMS had rolled over them earlier in the war. Because they were cross-sections of the march, if the Curitans could capture the capital and eliminate the leadership, they had effectively cleared a path straight through to the Crucis March. It was very challenging for the neighbouring combat regions to support them, or manoeuvre forces around in front of the advance. For that reason, Paul Davian came up with the concept of polymorphous defence zones. The Capellan and Draconis marches would be redistricted into irregular but interlinked areas that would hopefully prevent a similar collapse in the future. At the conclusion of the second Davian counteroffensive, the First Prince dispatched a small force to Mirak in December. This would be the final strike Paul planned to make against the Capellan Confederation, as most of his energy went into preparing for the next wave of attacks against the Draconis Combine. In March, the planet was his, and he began the third and final counteroffensive of the war. The goal was to push the Draconis Combine all the way back to their pre-war borders and establish a new defensive line. Once again, the AFFS approached from 2 directions, skirting along the edge of their old border from the Spinward end, while the main advance pushed deep into the former Clovis combat region. As anticipated, the DCMS had fortified the region substantially. They no longer displayed the same shell-shocked behaviour as they had in the aftermath of the Kintari massacre. They faced particularly stubborn resistance on Harrow's Sun. Regiments from the Combine interior had also been redeployed to the front. This was made possible in part through the actions of Amphigean Agriculture Incorporated, who in 2811 formed a security group to protect their assets and any supporting industries, thus freeing up the mustered soldiery and garrison to move elsewhere. Early in 2811,
Usually only the highest faction leader in a whole faction knows the whole situation. Everyone else are just guessing. Yeah, that's very true, chat. That's very true, chat. Yeah, I mean, Davian really put in a lot of effort on that counterattack just to get the land, I keep saying lands, the systems that they lost, and just bring it back to what it was before the whole thing. And he's really doing a much better job compared to the others. quite honestly, and that wasn't, and that's not easy. Of course, they resorted to nukes again. They're all back to nukes, started dropping nukes, but nevertheless, they really were fighting hard to get to make headways, and getting that help from the Ferris company, the agricultural group, was really a slick move. The first, the whole Boland thing, jeez, man, like, just give up those two. They just give up those two planets. It's not really worth it, especially when the supply line is blocked off and everything. You know, like when you look at the map, there's just no way to pull off a supply line, because you don't have a galaxy in the middle. You don't have a system in the middle, in the middle of that thumb, to be able to provide sort of like a relay point, to go to one end and to the other. You have to literally like, I'm surprised that they didn't line up a faction in the middle of that thumb where it's all empty space to effectively block out the make it an occupied territory and block everyone out, the supply lines. That would have been a much better maneuver to make, and that would have eventually starved out those two planets, and then take on those two systems and get them both back for good. I'm surprised that a play hasn't been made. And Kurita, of course, is trying to get the capital. From Davian, so they can really get in there, really take up a chunk. But a pretty brilliant move on Davian, creating the polymorphous defensive zone. If he gets back to pre-levels, he's no doubt he's going to expand that up there to make sure that that they'll never get caught off guard again and losing those systems like that.
Elsa Liao and Armashkarovka began an audacious operation that they hoped would give them an edge over their competitors. They began to approach Comstar technicians in the hope of winning them over to the Confederation. With their expertise, they could train their own loyal workforce and move to take control of the HPGs within their realm. If successful, they could avoid paying Comstar the substantial fees they charged on all military communiques. Things escalated around March-April time, when Mashkarovka agents posing as a terrorist group attempted to seize the hyperpulse station on Nanking, but remarkably, the attack was thwarted by the chief administrator and their staff, who ambushed them inside the facility. Comstar uncovered the identity of the terrorists soon after, and in May, the First Circuit agreed to form a covert security force in response, ROM. Training was to take place at the reactivated Sandhurst Military Academy, site of some of the most intense fighting during the Battle for Terra.
The Terra battle.
At the Terran end of the Capellan Confederation lay the former hegemony world of Brownsville. As a system of die-hard Amaris loyalists, they had received precious little in way of support from Alexander Kerensky after his liberation, and the world had fallen on hard times. This was a hardship partly of their own making, as their fervent commitments to the Emperor had led them to detonate nuclear warheads among their own industrial centers in order to prevent them from falling into SLDF hands.
Wow.
They had at least evacuated the complexes ahead of time, a courtesy rarely afforded by retreating AEAF forces. In one of the very few exceptions to the purge that followed the collapse of the Empire, the planetary government had retained its power, much to the consternation of people like Kerensky, and had tried for a time to maintain their independence. Witnessing the fate of Ingolsmund led them to finally submit before House Liao when they threatened a similar scouring in 2789. The decades-long process of rebuilding was finally coming to a conclusion in the early 29th century. What perhaps was not understood was that their reduced industrial output had allowed them to skirt under the radar in the earlier phase of the war, but now, with a functioning and relatively advanced industrial base, covetous neighbours were starting to look their way. In 2811, the Free Worlds League decided that the people of Brownsville would be better off under the protection of the Captain General. A force was dispatched to take control of what appeared to be a relatively undefended world. But the Brownsville militia were all veterans of the Civil War, their inexperienced younger generation siphoned off into the ranks of the CCAF. they put up unexpected resistance that the Marek forces could not contend with. It was a humiliation that the invaders were not prepared to leave unanswered. As they departed, a civilian freighter approached the system, going unnoticed by those on planet. As it moved into orbit, it unleashed a cargo of strategic weapons that obliterated the cities of Brownsville, killing more than 100 million civilians. The nuclear winter that followed was so severe that the death toll would reach 250 million within the next 2 years, almost half of the planet's population, and that number had doubled by war's end.
Jeez.
The few million survivors would all succumb to the planet's poisoned atmosphere within the next few decades. 2811 saw the final battles for what was once the Boland Front. Earlier in the year, 4 LCAF regiments descended on a crux for the second time. The defenders were still heavily damaged from the prior attack, and the Captain General had not been willing to resupply them. The Marek militia lifted off early on, leaving the Boland defenders to hold out as long as they could.
Look, you see that gap? That's what I'm talking about.
Were destroyed in May.
Between Herzberg and
Another
Kamenz,
4
just
regiments
block the whole
landed on
thing.
Marsal in November. Here, they faced off with the very last of the Boland defenders. Fanaticized by Marek propaganda, they gave their lives for a hopeless cause, dragging the battle out for 4 months before they fell. Over the winter, the Federated Suns succeeded in taking 3 more worlds from House Kirita. One of their targets was the planet Magi, part of the Draconis Combine since the colony was first founded, where they destroyed the Gallatin regulars and garrison. With the capture of Tishomingo, the pre-war Fairfax combat region was completely liberated. The next wave began in April, securing another 3 systems over the next 7 months, but only after fierce fighting on New Iverson. This was somewhat offset by the complete absence of the DCMS on Dobson. By this point, it was clear to Coordinator Jinjiro that Paul Davian was trying to isolate the capitals of Dahar 4 and Robinson, the command and control hubs for the mustered soldiery deployed within the occupied territory. 2812 was a rough year for the Lyran Commonwealth. At the same time as they were hunting down the last of the Boland defenders in February, the Draconis Combine attacked Caldria and Dove with an overwhelming force of light battle mechs. Moving too quickly for conventional weapons, the garrison commanders attempted to use nuclear warheads to stop them.
I still love this art.
The DCMS retaliated with chemical weapons on Dove, rendering the world inhospitable. The last of the civilian population would either evacuate off-world or die within the next 3 years. Around this time, the newly formed ROM were beginning their first operations within the Capellan Confederation. Relations between the two were frayed by the attempt at seizing an HPG the previous year. Both were looking to get retribution. ROM discovered that the Mashkarovka were plotting to assassinate the chief administrator of the Bryant HPG, a member of Comstar's First Circuit. After foiling their plans, the first major victory for the nascent covert ops group, Ilsa Liao ordered the Mashkarovka to cease any attempts at subverting Comstar control. The Chancellor had far greater ambitions at this time. Early in the year, a diversionary attack was launched by Blanford's Grenadiers on the planet Sirius. Though they succeeded in destroying the mercenaries in garrison, they did not try to hold on to the planet. Their objective was simply to misdirect the Federated Suns into thinking that Liao was focused on the Free World's border. A Capellan task force appeared above Chesterton in May. They faced only minimal resistance as they entered atmosphere. The 4 regiments touched down near various objectives that they hoped would finally bring the long-contested world under their control. Unfortunately for Liao, days before they departed the Confederation, an MIIO operative embedded within the Mashkarovka alerted Davian to their intended target, giving the AWFS just enough time to relocate a few regiments of their own to the planet ahead of the invasion. They laid low until the Seacaf made landfall, striking only as they began to emerge from their dropships. Unable to form a defensive line, the Capellans took heavy damage in these opening moments. Just 3 days into the campaign, the Capellan charges had been destroyed, and 7 other battalions had been ravaged by the defending garrison. The Liao commander had no choice but to call a retreat, leaving with their tail tucked between their legs.
Wow. That's rough, man. The whole entire plan just failed right off the bat, man. Right off the bat. Jeez. So, yeah, it's unfortunate for Liao on that one. It was a good effort. Everybody's gotten mad close to Terra. Right there. They're all just hugging it right now, looking to not take the planet itself because of the consequences that could happen, but to try and take as much orbit as possible around Terra to be able to maintain control of like supply lines and such, whatever they need from Terra. Jeez. Drop the whole nuke on Brownsville like that. That's some gross stuff, man. Like, wow. When you think about it, that's so weak, so cowardly, that they couldn't beat Brownsville. Nobody could beat Brownsville, so let's just send a gigantic freighter filled with enough nukes to not only annihilate billions of people on the initial blast, but to leave everyone in nuclear winter, and then the rest dying on through nuclear fallout. Just irradiated the entire planet Brownsville after it made so much effort recovering into a better way of life. Slipping under the radar as Sven said. That's pretty scary when you think about it. When you manage to make a full recovery for your society, and some a-hole decided, yeah, we want to take your planet. Oh, you're not going to give it back? All right, we'll just drop a nuke and no one will have it. Not even you. What was all of that for? I don't understand. I don't understand what that was all for. I think that was just inhumane at every level. To do. So, yeah, and the final button of the thumb, Merrick got drove out. And you see, if you saw the map, it was exactly like I said, that whole gap. What was it between... I didn't even write those two planets down. But that gap, you saw that gap. Just park your keister in between that gap and block the supply line. Suffocate the two planets, and then you get to take them back instead of just constantly going in and hoping three times the charm. That's a pretty dumb move, honestly. It would have been better if made a choke, put a chokehold on that open space area in the thumb. Yeah, and Federated Suns continue to make headways. Just marched right on in, taking back their planets systematically, figuratively and literally.
Within the Lyran Commonwealth, the declining numbers of available jump ships were causing ever greater suffering on worlds that relied on those vital food shipments to survive. Several systems were in the midst of terrible famines, contributing to the abhorrent death toll of the First Succession War as much as the use of WMDs on the front lines. In June, the Speaker of the Assembly officially disbanded the Estates General on account of how few of the planetary rulers were able to make it to Tharkad. On August 3rd, the Archon was holding court when he was approached by Landgrave Richard Perkins of Hegel. His planet was in the midst of a plague epidemic, and the vital medical supplies were not reaching the system on account of the military requisitioning all available jump ships. Among the many dead were Perkins's family. As the noble approached within 4 meters of Steiner, he drew a laser pistol and went to shoot the Archon, when one of the Griffin battlemechs standing guard slammed his fist down between the two. Perkins was taken captive, and the LIC quickly discovered that he had been paid handsomely by their rivals in SAFE to kill Richard Steiner. Thankfully, the attempt on his life had failed. Though the Lyran noble was sentenced to death, the Archon commuted his sentence to life imprisonment, understanding how the tragedy on Hegel had forced Perkins's hand. The final actions of 2812 came in November, when a Freewell's force landed on Alula Borealis, taking control of the system by year's end. The Lyran Intelligence Corps reported that this was likely the last move the Captain General would make for some time now, having thoroughly exhausted his forces in the region. With a brief reprieve, the Archon made the decision to disband his newly acquired elite regiment, the Stealths. and spread their experienced mech warriors across the Commonwealth's military academies. He hoped that they would inspire a new wave of more capable commanders to enter service within the LCAF, and hopefully rejuvenate his stagnant and uninspired officer corps.
Ooh, that's not good. People don't want to cut
In late
script.
2812, the AFFS landed on another trio of planets in their continued campaign to reclaim the entirety of the Federated Suns. They faced a determined defense from the garrison on Nouveau-Toulouse, but otherwise the systems were secure early in the new year. In March, troops were dispatched to the next wave of targets, capturing the remaining 6 systems by year's end. Those sent to Fairfield were particularly fortunate, as they discovered the DCMS had packed up and left long before their arrival. The Kurita Bulge had now been compressed down to its narrowest since the first week of Shinjiro's invasion. Next up were the primary targets of the counteroffensive, Dahar and Robinson.
Interesting. I would have gone for Bennett and Crossing to create that surrounding area there.
Was likely to be quiet for the foreseeable future, as House Maddock was dealing with the same supply and transport problems as the Commonwealth. What they failed to account for was that House Cameron Jones had several well-rested provincial regiments deep within the Principality of Regulus that could be moved up to the front line. Bella 1 was a world that had already changed hands twice during the First Succession War, but even still, it came as a shock when the FWLM arrived in April. The defenders were alerted to their presence as soon as they appeared at the zenith. Unsecured radio chatter revealed they faced 4 enemy regiments, a force they could not hope to hold off. Faced with the loss of his garrison, Colonel Hamlin decided to call for an immediate retreat off-world. The Lyran aerospace fighters were ordered not to engage the incoming dropships so that they would be at maximum strength to escort the Lyran regulars out to their jump ships. The Regulan Hussars were the first down and immediately moved to prevent the withdrawal. A frenzied battle took place at the spaceport, but Hamlin was able to lift off with most of his forces. It was only when they were halfway to the system's nadir that they realized that the Freeworld's guards hadn't even arrived in system yet.
Oh!
Colonel McGain's reckless attack had been a ruse to make them think that he was outnumbered. The
Oh.
Lyran commander did not remain a colonel for much longer once High Command discovered he'd surrendered Bella so easily.
Damn.
Not everything was going the League's way in 2813, however. In the spring, Comstar technician Emma Gomez at the Carver 5 base was discovered to be a safe operative feeding information back to the Captain General on Blake's activities. Their scheme was quickly foiled by ROM, and in the aftermath, Blake decided to expand the organization's internal security force to prevent any further leaks. The only other activity in 2813 occurred within the Tikhonov commonality. Paul Davian had hoped the loss at Chesterton would have dissuaded the Chancellor from making any other moves in the region, but the opportunistic Ilsa Liao knew that the First Prince was too busy with his counteroffensive to maintain much of a garrison in the region. Landing on Mirak in July, they took the world for the Confederation 2 months later. They also repulsed combine assaults on Bryant, Epsilon Indy, and Ingress.
Wow, that bad. They got a whole, they got a
Throughout
little
the First
territory.
Succession War, Comstar under Jerome Blake was content to sit back and play a largely pacifist role in maintaining the Innosphere's HBG network. Ensuring their continued monopoly over all interstellar communications was their sole aim at this point in their history. They did what they could to avoid becoming targets for the rampaging successor states by decommissioning their battlemech factories and naval yards and secretly mothballing their hidden warship fleet. Operation Silver Shield was the last overt military action that they took back at the beginning of the conflict, and there are very few other incidents in which their involvement is only suspected. Lauren Hayes, who had led her SLDF forces to victory on Terra, both alongside Kerensky and under the orders of the First Circuit, would retire within the next 2 years. The Comstar expeditionary divisions would themselves be disbanded, and their assets put into long-term storage beneath their headquarters at the Hilton Head HBG on Terra. But this was not the end of Comstar's involvement in the Succession Wars. The past few years had seen the emergence and fast growth of a new power within their ranks, ROM. This shadowy internal security force, answerable solely to the Prime Administrator, would soon become a secret intelligence agency to rival any belonging to the Great Houses.
Whoa.
The First Succession War would soon enter its final phase. Little did humanity know that one of the greatest opponents of peace had come into being, and was now spreading like a virus across the inner sphere.
Oh no.
Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's been a little while since the last one. I know I needed a little bit of a break. Putting out a chapter every single week was just taking so much of my time that after 2 months I couldn't keep it going any longer.
Well, there's
But
a
I've returned to the
lot.
project
There's a
now,
lot.
refreshed and with enough drive, I think, to see it through to the end. This was the last of the longer chapters, coming in at 30 minutes. I'm pretty sure the next 3 will all be in the 15 to 20 minute mark. Next week, we're going to be pressing pause on events on the inner sphere and taking the time to look at events out in the periphery. We've barely mentioned them at all, apart from a couple of incidents of the Lyran Commonwealth playing out in the ruins of the Rimwell's Republic, but they've had their own trials and tribulations going on, especially around this point where we're ending the episode. At the end of 2813, the one and only significant conflict to take place between 2 of the periphery nations, the
Hold on a second. Didn't he say that in the last video? Yeah, it's gonna be the it really is gonna be the next one. I checked it out, made sure, double check. He said the following video. This video is supposed to be the second phase and the rise of Rom, which is pretty crazy. So let's see what he's got in store.
Strategy of Canopus and the Taurian Concordat is about to kick off. It's a short-lived affair, and we're going to be going over it next time. Truth be told, the periphery plays such a minor part in the succession wars that I don't think we'll be hearing from them again for a long while now. I plan to do a video at some point on the history of the Oregon Reach, how House Arano came to lead the coalition, and everything that leads up into the beginning of the HBS BattleTech game. Events there don't really start to happen until after the end of the second succession war, so it's going to be a little while yet, but I think that'll be the next time we look at the periphery in any great detail. Right now they're just trying to keep their heads down and avoid the nukes that are flying back and forth.
Yeah, that was a crazy end there. Rom is now on the rise and is about to, I guess, become a common enemy to the whole entire inner sphere. That's pretty insane when you think about it. You know, after all that they went through, and Drone Blake was like, "Yeah, you know, we're gonna hold back. We're not gonna be hands on. We're going to decommission everything so we become a non-threat." And then all of a sudden, Rom is like, "Yeah, we're gonna be the threat." Oh my gosh! I gotta say, the Suns have done a great job reclaiming so much land from Kurita, and I still don't, and I don't know why they bothered going to the other areas where on the map they could have gone to. Did I write the? Well, I had pointed out where they went to. Here we go. Bennett and Crossing, probably Lima. If they were to have taken these three areas here, these three right here, then they would close off all this from Kurita. Most likely could have even cut off all supply lines for these guys, and most likely they wouldn't be able to hold up. I'm sure a lot of you will explain why that can't be possible, and I'm sure there's probably a logical reason why doing this may not be possible. But honestly, I would have tried that instead of going for Robinson and Poria, and again slowly going in there. I would have just closed this whole gap off and set up a whole big defensive front here. To keep the Kurita out, and then let all these guys here go right on in and just wipe out the any Kurita that's sitting in there, and just one fell swoop get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 systems in one swoop, in one go, and that would have been very humiliating to Kurita. I'm sure y'all will explain why that's not possible, but I would have given it a try, you know what I'm saying? Just to really stick a craw to Kurita. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, Rom is really going to be a big problem, aren't they? They were supposed to be a spy network to improve upon what the what Comstar had, and now they're about to rule the world, huh? They're about to rule the universe. I am very interested in learning more about ROM now. I might have to consider because there's only 3 more videos to go, and they are short. Short by Sven standards, but I should look up ROM. Maybe after he talks about the periphery, look up ROM before going into the last 2. I should consider doing that just so I could get a good handle on them and what they do before, and probably a little bit more detail into how they what their role was in the Secession War before going into the last 2 and finding out that they did something so insane. I'm probably not even gonna know. I won't have the context to understand why they were able to pull that off. I may have to consider doing that. So we'll have to see when we get through the next one, the periphery, before we get to the last 2. Get to the last 2 episodes of the Secession War. It's been pretty good. This has been very fantastic, and I have to say, even in the second phase, where the new group, the new Secession Lords, have been either making ways, like everybody's reclaiming some of their territory, while others are still losing their territory, and trying to find ways to get out of the war, like Ilsa tried to do. At least what she thought she was doing was trying to get Capellan out of the war by teaming up with Davian. But Davian was like, yeah, I'm gonna attack you guys anyway. And then everyone is like, what? All of his guys and his people are like, are you crazy? We could have gotten them off the board. And he's like, well, here's the thing. There's no more Terran hegemony. It's just only the planet itself. The planet is all that's left. The days of the Star League is over. It is lost in the historical ether. The original Successor Lords are all dead. At this point, what are we fighting for? It's very tragic. I do find it humorous that he came to that conclusion, but that nobody else seems to understand. But it's also at the same time pretty sad, how a war can do that. Where it would go for so long and go for such a long time that the reason why the war even began could end up being lost, and you're actually finding out, that you're fighting for something that no longer exists and can never exist again. And it's true. The Star League is gone. Kerensky is out in the periphery, and Jerome Blake established Comstar, and is working in the shadows. He's got a whole shadow government building up clearly with Rom, and chances are Terra's gonna end up being the one winning the whole war. It looks like. I don't know what the result is. Don't spoil. But Comstar's ROM looks like it's going to end up forming a shadow government in the entire sphere, and Comstar is going to be running the whole gig after this war is over, while everyone is trying to figure out what to do with their irradiated planets or their bacterial infested planets that annihilated all life as it is, and yeah. What can one do? What can one do? What can one do? What I'm saying? I mean, it's the natures of war and everything. But it was pretty impressive how everybody was either progressing or regressing. Watching the Boland Pinky now becoming the Boland Knuckle. Kurita now clearly, and we haven't heard much from Kurita, quite honestly. Like from their point of view of what's been going on. That Kantari massacre that really did wreck the morale. Did really wreck the morale and shame the people, because Damien is like, yeah, we're gonna take back our worlds, and we're gonna establish this little border, a defensive border. Think Maginot Line, and if you try again, we're going to stop you. And in the meantime, they're just really pushing back. Yeah, Kurita royally effed up with Kantari. I guess the fanaticism is starting to wane and die down. They're fighting, and it's like it was all for nothing, saying his father died for nothing because he was the one that started the whole damn thing. He's like, yeah, I'm the ruler of the galaxy, all of the inner sphere. When he took, oh man, this is honestly, has way more to lose than any other houses, because of the fact that not only were they ones that started it, but they lost the guy who started it. So so the leadership is in the hands of a madman. The madman forgot why his mad dad did this in the first place, and the Combine is going to really have one heck of a demoralized defeat in the end. I could really see the parallels too when you think about it of the United States island hopping the Pacific Islands, making their way into on their way to Japan, the mainland Honshu, and especially when they got to Okinawa, and you could see it with the way the Confederate Sons was just systematically retaking it one right after another, leading into getting closer to the Combine itself, getting to that pre-borders stuff. It's very interesting to see that parallel happening there. The Lore Masters really really got a good metaphor. I don't know if it was deliberate or anything, but they pretty much really got that parallel going there regarding the Sons and the Combine. It's pretty cool. So yeah, this was another good video. Very good. I found it funny. I found that funny when what's his name? Perkins got slammed by Steiner. That's why he's got those two giant megs there. Steiner, Perkins was like, die. Mavericks like, punch. Just sent a whole big giant metal fist on him, and somehow he survived. I don't know how he survived that. But that was pretty freaking hilarious. I was expecting a laser beam, not a fist. my man was like the mech just was like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, just comes in, and you know how they have to like crazy crouch to hit Little Mac, that they had to do that to Perkins. They had to like crouch all the way down, go. That would have been cool if they would have said that was an uppercut. Although that would have been very dumb for a serious series. But me, I would have been like, yeah, he aimed at Perkins aimed at Steiner. The giant mech took a few steps, crouched very low, and delivered an uppercut. So yeah, we're gonna finally do the periphery, and that's gonna be interesting to see. Even though it was a non-factor, the periphery was a non-factor. It's still interesting to see what they at least did on their end. We saw a little bit of that earlier, but now we're gonna get to see a little bit more of it, and what and how they were able to impact themselves, like what were they able to take advantage of, and so on. So we'll find that out in the next one. All right. So head on over to Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com and grab yourself a copy of The Impossible Man, a strange fantasy novel written by me. You'll find links to the book down in the description below, along with links to other merch such as pins, stickers, t-shirts, music. Enjoy the products. Thank you for your patronage. And if you happen to have a copy of The Impossible Man and did a lore video on my book, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it. And if you're interested, you can join me in my live multi-stream on Twitch and Kick on the weeknights, where I do Japanese cultural studies, lore research and reactions, gaming, and more. I'm working on that little ending now. I look forward to hanging out with you. So until the next round of BattleTech Mech Warrior Research, thank you all for joining me, and I wish you all a good night. Buenas noches, and oyasumi nasai.